You are not my daughter anymore." My father's scream cut through the polite chatter of the engagement party like a gunshot. I did not even have a second to brace myself. I felt his hands, heavy and rough, slam into my chest with the force of a man who hated what he saw. The world tilted backward. Then, the cold shock of the infinity pool swallowed me whole. I surfaced, gasping for air, my cheap office suit clinging to my skin, ruining the pristine blue water of the Sterling coastal vineyard. 200 guests froze. The jazz band stopped playing. My sister, Rose, stood on the deck holding her champagne flute, and she smirked. My father stood at the edge, adjusting his cuffs, looking down at me like I was a piece of trash he had finally thrown out. I wiped the chlorine from my eyes. I did not cry. I did not scream. I treaded water, looked him dead in the eye, and whispered, "Remember this moment. Stop scrolling. If your own father pushed you into a pool in front of 200 people just for speaking the truth, be honest. Would you run away crying? Or would you destroy him? Drop a run or destroy in the comments right now." The wind from the rotor blades did not just disturb the party, it decimated it. Napkins flew like white flags of surrender. The pristine floral arrangements Rose had spent 6 months curating were flattened against the tables. I watched from the water, shivering not from cold, but from a sudden, terrifying clarity. A sleek black helicopter descended onto the cliffside helipad, a machine of war in a garden of vanity. The door opened, and Alexander stepped out. My family froze. They knew Alexander as the quiet carpenter I had brought to dinner once, the man my father had mocked for having rough hands, but the man walking toward the pool now was not wearing flannel. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Rose's entire venue. 2 security guards flanked him, their movements precise, lethal. He did not run. He did not shout. He walked with the terrifying calm of a man who owns the ground he steps on. He stopped at the edge of the infinity pool and extended a hand. I took it. He pulled me up in one smooth motion, the water cascading off my cheap suit onto the expensive limestone deck. He did not look at my father. He did not look at Rose. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of sandalwood and absolute safety. "Alexander," my father stammered, his face pale. We were just." Alexander turned. His eyes were cold enough to freeze the pool solid. "She will not be needing your name anymore." He guided me toward the helicopter. I did not look back. I did not need to see their faces to know they were terrified. I just climbed in, buckled the harness, and watched the ground fall away as we lifted off. As the vineyard shrank into a green square below us, a strange silence settled in my chest. For years, people had asked me the same question, usually with a look of pity: "Why do you keep going back? Why did I attend the engagement party of a sister who stole my designs? Why did I seek the approval of a father who treated me like an overhead cost he wanted to cut?" It is called the invisible chain of the survivor. It is a psychological tether that binds you to the people who hurt you, forged not from love, but from the desperate, illogical hope of the inner child. You tell yourself that if you just work harder, if you just design a better building, if you just stay quiet enough, they will finally see you. You convince yourself that their cruelty is a flaw in your performance, not their character. You think the cage is a home because you have never known the sky. But when my father's hands hit my chest, when gravity took over, and I hit that water, something physical happened in my brain. The shock did not just wake me up. It snapped the chain. I looked down at my hands, still trembling slightly. I was not shaking from the cold. I was shaking from the sudden, massive release of weight. I realized I had not gone to the party to celebrate Rose. I had gone to give my father one last chance to be a father. He had answered with a shove, and in that answer, he had set me free. The hope was dead, drowned in the chlorine, and in its place, something cold and sharp was beginning to take shape. A blueprint. Not for a building, but for a demolition. I looked at Alexander. He was watching me, his hand resting protectively on my knee. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice cutting through the noise of the engine. "No," I said, and my voice was steady, surprising even me. "I am not okay. I am ready." I turned to look out the window, at the city skyline approaching, my city, built on foundations I understood better than anyone. My father thought he had disposed of a liability. He did not realize he had just declared war on the architect who held the keys to his entire reality. The next morning, the sun broke over the city, turning the glass walls of Alexander's penthouse into mirrors. I stood in the center of the living room, staring at the view. It was ironic. My father had spent his entire career trying to build something this high, this untouchable, and here I was, standing in it, not because I had married rich, but because I had built the company that owned the building. "Coffee?" Alexander asked, walking in. He placed a mug in my hands. "You did not sleep." "I was thinking," I said, taking a sip, "about the timeline." 5 years, Alexander said softly. 5 years of you working in the dark so Rose could shine in the light. He was not exaggerating. For 5 years, I had been the ghost in the machine of Sterling Vance developments. My father had made the arrangement clear the day I graduated with my master's degree. "Rose is the face," he had said. "You are the back end." He claimed it was because I was too awkward for clients, too intense for the boardroom. The reality was simpler. I was better than him, and he knew it. So I worked from a basement office, correcting Rose's structural errors, redrawing her impossible floor plans, ensuring the buildings did not collapse while she accepted awards for visionary design. I told myself I was doing it to keep the family afloat. I told myself loyalty meant sacrifice. But last night, in the helicopter, I realized loyalty to a parasite is not nobility, it is suicide. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. Richard. I picked it up, putting it on speaker. Alexander leaned against the island, crossing his arms. "Pearl." My father's voice barked, devoid of any apology. "I need the CAD files for the glass spire project. Now." I did not answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. "Did you hear me?" he demanded. "Rose is stressed. She has a press interview at noon about the design inspiration, and she needs the specs to prep. Send them over." "No," I said. "Excuse me?" I said no. Rose is the lead architect, is she not? Surely she has her own files. "Don't play games with me, Pearl." His voice dropped, turning menacing. "After that stunt you pulled yesterday with the helicopter, you are lucky I am even calling you. You embarrassed this family. You embarrassed Rose." "I was pushed into a pool, Richard," I said, my voice flat. "I think the embarrassment was mutual." "That was a reaction to your hysteria," he snapped. "And as for that display, who did you hire? Some actor? Renting a helicopter does not make you successful, Pearl. It makes you desperate." Everyone saw right through it. He did not believe it. Of course he did not. In his world, I was incapable of attracting power because I possessed no value. The idea that Alexander, the man I loved, the man who held my hand through panic attacks and deadlines, was actually a billionaire real estate tycoon was simply outside his cognitive range. "Send the files," he threatened, "or you are done. I will blacklist you. I will make sure you never draw a line in this town again. Do you understand? You will be nothing." I looked at Alexander. He was not angry. He was smiling, a small, sharp smile that said he knew exactly what was coming. "I understand perfectly," I said. "Goodbye, Richard." I hung up. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the old urge to fix it, to smooth it over, to send the files just to stop the yelling. I felt the cold, hard click of a weapon loading. "He thinks I am nothing," I said to the room. "He thinks you are his employee," Alexander corrected. "He does not know you are his creditor." I opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the logo of Anonymous Architecture, the boutique firm my father had hired 6 months ago to salvage his failing marina project. He thought he was outsourcing to a prestigious overseas consultancy. He thought he was buying salvation. He did not know he had signed a contract with his own daughter. I navigated to the project dashboard. The glass spire files were there, locked behind my encryption. Rose could not open them. She could not edit them. She could not even print them. "Ready?" Alexander asked. "More than ready," I said. I hit the key to execute the next phase. It wasn't just about withholding files. It was about triggering the clause he had never bothered to read. The clause that stated if the primary client failed to meet competency standards, the consulting firm had the right to assume total executive control. He wanted the files? He was about to get the whole firm. And the bill that came with it. The conference room at Alexander's headquarters smelled of ozone and billable hours. 3 of the city's most expensive corporate attorneys sat across from me, reviewing the acquisition strategy. They looked nervous. They thought we were attempting a hostile takeover of a failing company. "We are not buying Sterling Vance," I said, sliding a thick binder across the mahogany table. "We are recalling a defective product." The lead attorney, a man named Davis, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Sterling, while your husband's capital is significant, Richard Vance is entrenched. He owns the majority voting stock. He will not sell." "He does not have to sell," I replied. "He already signed the rights away 6 months ago." I opened the binder to page 4. The logo at the top read Anonymous Architecture. It was the boutique firm my father had hired in a panic when the marina project started sinking into the bay. He thought he was hiring a prestigious, faceless consultancy from Zurich to clean up Rose's mess. He thought he was buying a safety net. He did not know he was hiring a shell company owned 100% by his scapegoat daughter. Clause 14. Section B. I said, tapping the paper. The competency protocol. If the primary client fails to meet safety regulations on 3 consecutive inspections, the consulting firm reserves the right to assume executive control of the project to prevent liability. I looked at Davis. Rose failed 4 inspections last week. The glass spire is a structural hazard. As the owner of Anonymous Architecture, I am triggering the clause. I am not asking for a seat at the table. I am taking the whole room. Davis read the clause. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. "This is lethal. He signed this?" "He did not read it," I said. "He never reads anything I write." The door clicked open. Alexander walked in. He was not smiling. He carried a small, silver ruggedized case, the kind used to transport diamonds or state secrets. He placed it on the table in front of me. "The lawyers can handle the corporate acquisition," Alexander said, his voice low. He opened the case. Inside sat a single, tarnished USB drive. "It was in a safety deposit box at a bank in Zurich," Alexander explained. "Your mother's name was on the box. But the access key, she left it for you. It took my team 12 hours to decrypt the files. My mother. She had died when I was 10. My father had always told me she died penniless, leaving us with nothing but debt and the vineyard he had heroically saved." I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen flickered, then populated with scanned documents, deeds, trusts, bank transfers. I clicked on the file labeled Sterling Coastal Vineyard Original Title. The document was not in my father's name. It never had been. The vineyard had been purchased by my mother's family in the 50s. And the transfer of deed. I squinted at the screen. The date of transfer to Richard Vance was 3 weeks after my mother's death. I zoomed in on the signature. It was shaky, a forgery. "He did not save the vineyard," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "He stole it. He forged the transfer," Alexander confirmed. "The original will, which is also on that drive, left the land, the house, and the water rights entirely to you. Held in trust until you turned 25. I sat back. The air in the room seemed to thin. For 18 years, my father had walked around that estate like a king. He had pushed me into a pool on my land. He had told me I was a guest in my home. He was not a tycoon, he was a squatter. The anger that flared in my chest wasn't hot, it was absolute zero. All the gaslighting, the dismissal, the desperate need to keep me feeling small, it wasn't just narcissism, it was fear. He knew that if I ever looked at the paperwork, his empire would dissolve. I looked at Davis. "Change the strategy. Miss Sterling, we are not just taking the company," I said, my voice steady. "I want the land, I want the house, I want the water rights. Draft an eviction notice." Davis hesitated. "Eviction? For Richard Vance? He is trespassing on my property," I said. "He has been trespassing for 18 years. I want him out. And I want him out by Monday." Alexander put his hand over mine. I looked at the screen, at my mother's signature. the real one, on the will she had tried to protect me with. I am done being the daughter, I said. It is time to be the landlord. Monday morning at Sterling Vance Developments usually started with the sound of my father shouting. Today was no different. I could hear him through the double mahogany doors of the boardroom before I even touched the handle. Find out who owns anonymous architecture, he was screaming. They are trying to hostile take over my project. Get legal on the phone, threaten them, sue them. I don't care. I adjusted the cuffs of my white suit. It was a stark, deliberate contrast to the sodden, cheap fabric I had worn 48 hours ago. Alexander stood behind me, holding my briefcase. He nodded once. I pushed the doors open. The room went silent. Richard stood at the head of the table, his face a mottled red. Rose sat to his right, looking pale and terrified, clutching a tablet like a shield. Cynthia was there, too, inexplicably, perhaps for moral support or perhaps to ensure the family image remained intact even as the ship sank. Pearl? Richard blinked, his confusion momentarily overriding his anger. Then he laughed. A short, barking sound. You have some nerve showing up here. Did you come to apologize? Or did you come to beg for your job back? I did not answer. I walked past the gaping junior executives. I walked past Rose, who shrank back as if I were radioactive. I walked straight to the head of the table. You are in my seat, Richard, I said. Excuse me? You are in my seat. Move. Have you lost your mind? He looked around the room, seeking an audience for his incredulity. Security. Get her out of here. Security works for the majority shareholder, I said, placing the binder on the table. That is not you anymore. I signaled to the AV technician, a young guy named Marcus who I had helped with coding issues a dozen times. He looked at me, then at Richard, and made his choice. He plugged in my drive. The screen behind Richard lit up. It was not a presentation, it was a certificate of incorporation. Anonymous Architecture, LLC. Sole proprietor, Pearl Sterling. You wanted to know who owns the firm holding your debt, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. You wanted to know who holds the performance clause you violated. It is me. Richard stared at the screen. He looked at the logo he had signed checks to for 6 months. He looked at me. That is impossible, he whispered. You draw sketches. You do not run companies. I ran this company for 5 years, I corrected. I just did it from the basement while you took credit for the view. I tapped the table. Clause 14. Executive control. You failed to meet safety standards on the glass spire. You failed to meet solvency requirements on the marina. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Anonymous Architecture has exercised its right to seize operational control of Sterling Vance to prevent further liability. I pointed to the door. Now. Get out of my chair. Richard did not move. He could not. He was experiencing what psychologists call a narcissistic injury. It wasn't just shock. It was a psychological system failure. To a narcissist, people like me are objects, tools to be used or trash to be discarded. We do not have agency. We certainly do not have power. Seeing me standing there, holding the keys to his kingdom, did not just make him angry, it broke his reality. His brain was glitching, unable to process a world where the scapegoat had become the master. Rose, he gasped, pivoting to his golden child. Tell her about the designs. Tell her you fixed the load-bearing issues. All eyes turned to Rose. She looked small, frail. Rose? I asked gently. Do you want to explain to the board how you calculated the tensile strength of the glass atrium? She opened her mouth. I used the... She looked at Richard, panic rising in her throat. I don't know, she whispered. Pearl always did the math. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Fraud, Alexander said from the back of the room. It was the first time he had spoken. That is the word you are looking for, Richard. Corporate fraud. This is my company, Richard roared, slamming his hand on the table, trying to use volume to replace authority. My father built this. It is my legacy. You cannot take it. Actually, I said, sliding the second document across the polished wood. I am not taking the company. I am taking the building. I opened the folder containing the land deeds, the yellowed, original titles my mother had hidden away. You do not own the land this building sits on, Richard. You do not own the vineyard. You do not own the estate. My mother left them to me. You forged the transfer. Cynthia let out a sharp, strangled gasp. Richard went white. I am the landlord, I said. And you are trespassing. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises. If you are still here at 11 a.m., I will have you removed by the police. And unlike you, I will not just push you into a pool. I will press charges. We are family, Richard whispered. His voice was trembling now. The bluster was gone, replaced by a terrifying, hollow desperation. Pearl, I am your father. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had shoved me into the water 2 days ago. I looked for any spark of love, any memory of kindness. You drowned your daughter last Saturday, I said coldly. I am just the CEO. I turned to the board. Meeting adjourned. Security stepped forward. They did not look at Richard. They looked at me for orders. Escort Mr. Vance and his family out, I said. And make sure they do not take any company property. That includes the staplers. I watched them go. Richard stumbling, Cynthia weeping, Rose silent and broken. The elevator doors closed, sealing them out of my world. I did not cheer. I did not pop champagne. I walked to the window and looked out at the city I had helped build but never owned. It is done, Alexander said, coming up beside me. No, I said, looking at the skyline. The demolition is done. Now, we build. The next week was a blur of legal filings and rebranding. We dissolved Sterling Vance. We stripped the name off the building. In its place, we hung a new sign, Eleanor Group, named after my mother. I sat in my new office, Richard's old office, stripped of his ego and pretension, and signed the final papers. But there was one last thing to do. The profits, I said to Alexander. From the Marina project? And the Spire. What about them? I do not want them. I did not want Richard's money. I wanted to change the system that created men like him. I am starting a foundation, I said. The Blueprint Fund. It was not enough to just win. Justice is not just punishing the guilty. It is planting seeds for the innocent. I wanted to find every other girl who was being told she was too quiet, too awkward, or too female to build skyscrapers. I wanted to pay for their tuition. I wanted to give them the tools I never had. This is the justice of the sower. Revenge burns the field, justice replants it. I was not going to let Richard's toxicity poison the soil forever. I was going to grow a forest of women who would tower over his legacy. We walked out onto the balcony. The wind was high, whipping my hair, but I did not flinch. I looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, my father was sitting in a rented apartment, wondering where he went wrong. He would never understand. Proud of yourself? Alexander asked, echoing the question he had asked the night of the party. I smiled. No, I whispered. I am free. If you have ever had to build your own castle because your family locked you out of theirs, share this story. Let's remind the world that the architects of their own destiny are the hardest to break.